Raven Blackwood had seen her share of unusual specimens in the Galactic Research Institute, but nothing quite like this. The being that materialized in the quantum chamber stood nearly 7 feet tall, with iridescent scales that shifted colors like oil on water. Its 4 eyes, each a different shade of violet, fixed upon her with unsettling intensity. Dr. Blackwood, the alien's voice resonated with a melodic quality that made the hair on her arms stand up. I am Nixus of the Etherian Collective. Your reputation precedes you. Raven straightened her lab coat, grateful for years of diplomatic training that kept her voice steady. Welcome to Earth's premier xenobiological research facility. Though I must admit, we weren't expecting such a direct arrival. Nixus's scales rippled with what might have been amusement. My species believes in efficiency. Your planetary defense grid has been temporarily adjusted to allow my presence. That casual mention of bypassing Earth's most sophisticated security systems sent a chill down Raven's spine. The Etherians were legendary for their advanced technology and mysterious nature, but this was her first direct encounter with one. I come seeking knowledge, Nixus continued, moving with liquid grace as they examined the lab equipment. Specifically, about human reproduction. Raven blinked, caught off guard. Human reproduction. Surely your databases contain that basic biological information. Data is one thing, Doctor. Understanding is another. Nixus turned those unsettling violet eyes back to her. My species reproduces through energy transfer and consciousness division. The concept of physical mating is fascinating to us. Us? Raven raised an eyebrow. Are you representing the entire Etherian collective in this research? Nixus's scales shifted to a deeper hue. Let us say I have a personal interest. One that my superiors need not be aware of. Warning bells rang in Raven's mind. An unauthorized Etherian researcher with the power to bypass planetary defenses, asking about human reproduction. This had trouble written all over it. Perhaps we should start with the basics of human biology, Raven suggested carefully. Our cellular structure, DNA replication. I am particularly interested in the emotional aspects, Nixus interrupted. The chemical and neurological responses that drive humans to seek physical intimacy. It seems inefficient, yet you continue to reproduce this way despite having the technology for artificial gestation. Raven felt her cheeks warm. Love and attraction are complex subjects that go beyond mere biological imperatives. Love. Nixus tested the word as if tasting it. Another fascinating concept. In my research, I found humans will often risk everything for this emotional state. Even their lives. Sometimes the things worth living for are also worth dying for, Raven replied, surprising herself with the conviction in her voice. Nixus moved closer, their scales now pulsing with subtle patterns of light. Would you help me understand, Dr. Blackwood? Not just the clinical aspects, but the experience itself. Raven's heart raced as she realized the implications. Are you proposing personal research? I am proposing an exchange of knowledge. Nixus's voice dropped to a lower register that seemed to vibrate through Raven's bones. You study me, I study you. With full consent and scientific documentation, of course. The rational part of Raven's brain screamed that this was a terrible idea. The Etherians were notoriously secretive and potentially dangerous. But the scientist in her couldn't deny the unprecedented opportunity for xenobiological research. What exactly would this exchange entail, she heard herself asking. Nixus's scales erupted in a dazzling display of colors. Everything, Doctor. I want to understand human pleasure, pain, desire, all of it. And in return, I will show you aspects of Etherian biology never before revealed to your species. Raven took a deep breath, knowing her next words would change her life forever. When do we begin? The weeks that followed transformed Raven's lab into a haven of unprecedented discovery. Nixus proved to be an endless source of fascination, their alien biology defying everything she thought she knew about life itself. Your cellular structure, Raven muttered, adjusting her holographic microscope. It's not just organic matter, but some kind of energy matrix. How is that even possible? Nixus hovered nearby, their scales shimmering with what Raven had learned to recognize as intellectual excitement. We exist in multiple dimensional states simultaneously. What you see as physical form is merely the intersection point with your reality. That explains why our standard scanning equipment keeps malfunctioning, Raven said, making notes on her tablet. Your body literally exists beyond our ability to measure it. Just as your emotional responses exist beyond our traditional understanding, Nixus countered, moving closer. Show me again what happens when I do this. They reached out, trailing ethereal fingers along Raven's arm. The touch sent shivers through her body, her skin erupting in goosebumps. The biomonitors attached to her wrist immediately registered spikes in her heart rate and hormone levels. Fascinating, Nixus murmured, their violet eyes studying the readings. Such a strong physiological response to simple tactile stimulation. And you experience this as pleasant? Raven swallowed hard, trying to maintain professional detachment. Yes, though the intensity varies depending on emotional context and previous experiences with the person initiating contact. Person, Nixus repeated thoughtfully. You see me as a person, then? Despite our differences? Of course I do, Raven replied without hesitation. Sentience isn't limited to human form. Nixus's scales rippled with an emotion she couldn't quite interpret. Many of your kind would disagree. I have accessed your historical records. Humans often fear what they don't understand. Fear can be overcome by knowledge, Raven said softly. That's why we're doing this research, isn't it? Indeed. Nixus moved to the center of the lab, their forms seeming to pulse with internal light. Perhaps it's time I showed you something few humans have ever witnessed. The true nature of Etherian reproduction. The air in the lab grew thick with electromagnetic energy as Nixus's physical form began to shift. Their scales separated into countless points of light, spreading out in a mesmerizing display that filled the room. This is our natural state, Nixus's voice seemed to come from everywhere at once. Pure energy, consciousness untethered from singular form. When we reproduce, we divide this energy, creating new awareness from our own essence. Raven stood transfixed, her scientific mind racing to process what she was seeing. It's beautiful, she breathed, reaching out to touch one of the floating points of light. The moment her finger made contact, her consciousness exploded with sensation. She felt Nixus's presence in her mind, a vast alien awareness that threatened to overwhelm her. Careful, Nixus warned, quickly reforming into their humanoid shape. Your mind isn't structured to handle direct energy transfer. At least, not yet. Not yet? Raven gasped, still reeling from the brief contact. What do you mean? Nixus's scales darkened to a deep indigo. There are ways to prepare a human consciousness for deeper connection. But such methods are forbidden by my people. The sharing of such knowledge with other species is considered a grave crime. Is that why you came here unofficially? Raven asked, pieces starting to fall into place. You're not just studying human reproduction, you're looking for a way to bridge our species. You are remarkably perceptive, Dr. Blackwood, Nixus said, their voice carrying a note of sadness. But you cannot imagine the consequences if my true purpose were discovered. The Etherian collective maintains its power through biological superiority. The idea that we could merge with lesser species is considered heresy. Raven stepped closer, her heart pounding. Why risk it then? Why me? Because in all my centuries of existence, I have never encountered a species that feels so deeply, loves so fiercely, dreams so boldly, Nixus replied, their scales beginning to pulse in rhythm with Raven's heartbeat. Your way of reproduction, of connecting both physically and emotionally, it holds secrets my people have forgotten in our pursuit of perfection. And what happens if we succeed? Raven whispered. If we find a way to truly bridge our species, then everything changes, Nixis said, reaching out to trace the curve of her cheek. For both our kinds. The question is, are you willing to risk everything to find out? Raven leaned into their touch, her scientific objectivity warring with growing emotional attachment. I thought I was supposed to be teaching you about human reproduction, she said with a nervous laugh. How did we end up plotting revolution? Perhaps the two are not so different, Nixis mused. Both involve the creation of something new, something that has never existed before. Both require courage, trust, and a willingness to be forever changed by the experience. As their eyes met, Raven knew she had already made her choice. Whatever consequences lay ahead, the chance to make history, to bridge the gap between their species, was worth any risk. Little did she know just how high the price would be. The warning came at midnight. Raven was reviewing her research notes when every screen in the lab flashed red. The facility's AI spoke with uncharacteristic urgency, multiple quantum signatures detected. Etherian vessels entering Earth's atmosphere. They found me. Nixis's scales paled to an ashen gray. We have minutes, at most. Raven's fingers flew across her console, securing their research data. I thought you said they couldn't track you. They tracked the energy signature from our experiments, Nixis moved with fluid grace, helping her download the critical files. The quantum resonance between us created a beacon they couldn't ignore. The lab's reinforced doors sealed automatically as distant alarms began to wail. Through the windows, Raven could see multiple ships descending, their crystalline structures catching the moonlight like massive diamonds. Nixis of the third wavelength, a voice boomed through the facility's communications system. You stand accused of forbidden knowledge sharing and attempted species corruption. Surrender immediately. Raven's hand found Nixis's, their fingers intertwining. What happens if they take you? Best case. Memory wipe and permanent isolation, Nixis's scales rippled with fear. Worst case. They'll dissect my consciousness to learn how I achieved partial fusion with a human mind. Like hell they will, Raven growled, pulling up the facility's defense protocols. We're not done with our research yet. Raven, you don't understand, Nixis's voice carried an edge of desperation. These are Etherian Inquisitors. They'll tear this facility apart to get to me. Then we'll have to give them something else to worry about. Raven's fingers danced across the console as she accessed restricted protocols. Did you know humans have been studying Etherian energy signatures ever since first contact? The massive quantum chamber in the center of the lab began to hum, its containment fields shifting to match the frequency Raven had input. What are you doing? Nixis asked, their scales shifting rapidly between colors. Creating a resonance cascade, Raven explained, her voice steady despite her racing heart. If they want to track energy signatures, we'll give them hundreds to chase. The chamber pulsed with increasing intensity as Raven fed more power into it. Around them, equipment began to spark and short out from the quantum interference. Final warning, the Inquisitor's voice boomed. Surrender or we will begin forcible extraction. Nixis moved to the chamber's control panel, their forms starting to dissolve into pure energy. Your plan is brilliant but flawed. The cascade needs an energy source strong enough to maintain multiple signatures. Raven met their gaze, understanding dawning. You want to use yourself as the power source. That could kill you. Not if we complete what we started, Nixis's voice took on an ethereal quality as their physical form continued to dissolve. The partial fusion we achieved in our experiments, we need to take it further. Join your consciousness with mine. That's insane, Raven protested. You said humans couldn't survive direct energy transfer. Humans alone, no, Nixis agreed, their form now mostly energy. But you're not entirely human anymore, are you? Our experiments changed you, prepared your mind. Trust me. The facility shook as the Inquisitors began their assault. Raven had seconds to decide. If this goes wrong, she began. Then we face oblivion together, Nixis finished. But if it works, we prove that our species can truly unite. That love transcends physical form. Love. The word hung between them, finally spoken after weeks of dancing around it. Raven took a deep breath and stepped into the quantum chamber. The moment Nixis's energy form enveloped her, the world exploded into sensation. Colors she had no names for, dimensions she couldn't comprehend, thoughts that weren't her own yet felt intimately familiar. She was drowning and flying, burning and freezing, dying and being reborn all at once. Focus, Nixis's consciousness wrapped around hers like a loving embrace. Feel the rhythm of our combined energy. Direct it outward. Together, they became a nexus of power. The quantum chamber amplified their unified energy, sending out pulses that manifested as hundreds of false signatures. Each one a perfect replica of their combined resonance. Through their shared consciousness, Raven felt the Inquisitor's confusion as their sensors were overwhelmed. Ships scattered in different directions, chasing phantom signals. But she also felt something else, Nixis's essence beginning to fade. You're burning too much energy, she realized with horror. You're dying. A necessary sacrifice, Nixis's thoughts were growing weaker. They'll never stop hunting us otherwise. No. Raven fought against the dissolution, wrapping her consciousness around Nixis's fading essence. You wanted to understand human reproduction. This is part of it, we fight like hell to protect the ones we love. Drawing on strength she didn't know she possessed, Raven began feeding her own life force into their connection. The quantum chamber hummed at frequencies that threatened to tear it apart. What are you doing? Nixis's thoughts held a mix of wonder and fear. Creating something new, Raven gritted out. Like you said, both reproduction and revolution require the courage to be forever changed. The energy between them built to impossible levels. In that moment of perfect fusion, they were neither human nor Etherean, but something entirely new. The quantum chamber exploded in a blast of pure white light. Consciousness returned slowly, like waves lapping at a distant shore. Raven opened her eyes to find herself lying in the wreckage of the lab, surrounded by scattered equipment and shattered glass. But something was different. The world seemed sharper, more vibrant, filled with spectrums of light and energy she'd never perceived before. Nixis, she called out, her voice carrying harmonic undertones that made the remaining intact equipment resonate. I am here, came the response, not in words but in pulses of energy that Raven somehow understood. Though perhaps not quite as I was. A form coalesced beside her, familiar yet changed. Nixis's scales now held traces of human DNA patterns, their energy structure partially solidified into something between flesh and light. But more striking were their eyes, now a swirling mix of violet and human brown, mirror images of Raven's own transformed gaze. We did it, Raven breathed, watching patterns of energy flow between them like invisible threads. We actually merged our species. More than that, Nixis reached out, their touch sending cascades of shared sensation through their connected consciousness. We've created something entirely new. Something that should have been impossible. Raven stood, marveling at how her body now existed in multiple states simultaneously, both solid and energy, human and Etherean. The Inquisitors. Gone, for now. Our energy cascade confused their tracking systems. Nixis's expression grew troubled. But they'll return once they realize most of the signatures were false. Let them come, Raven said with newfound confidence. We're neither prey nor heretics now. We're proof that evolution doesn't have to stop at arbitrary boundaries. She walked to a broken monitor, studying her reflection. Her skin now held a subtle iridescence, and tiny scale-like patterns emerged when she moved. But the biggest change was internal. She could feel the quantum field around her, could sense the flow of energy through space and time. The question is, Nixis moved behind her, their energies automatically synchronizing, what do we do with this gift? We share it, Raven turned to face them. Isn't that what started all this? Your desire to understand human reproduction, my curiosity about Etherean biology. We prove that connection, love, can transcend every barrier we put up. The collective will never accept this, Nixus warned. They'll see us as an abomination. Then we'll find others who will. There must be more like you, more like me, people willing to reach across the divide. Raven's mind raced with possibilities. We could establish a new research facility, somewhere off-world. Study the process that changed us, refine it. Create a safe haven for interspecies couples, Nixus continued, catching her enthusiasm through their link. A place to explore the full potential of unified consciousness. Exactly, Raven grinned. After all, isn't that what reproduction is really about? Creating something new, something that carries the best of both parents forward. She began gathering salvageable equipment, her enhanced strength making the work easy. We'll need to move quickly, establish ourselves before the Inquisitors regroup. I have contacts in the outer colonies who might. She broke off as Nixus suddenly stiffened, their scales flashing warning colors. What is it? Something's wrong, Nixus's voice was strained. The fusion, it's still changing us. Raven felt it too now, a burning sensation deep in their shared energy field. Their combined consciousness flickered like a faulty light. Our patterns are still trying to stabilize, she realized, quickly scanning their quantum signatures. The merger isn't complete. If we don't find a way to balance the human and Etherean aspects. Nixus didn't need to finish the thought. Through their link, Raven could feel the potential consequences, their unified form could collapse, destroying them both. Then we'll find a way, Raven said firmly, pushing aside her fear. We didn't come this far to fail now. She pulled Nixus into the remains of the quantum chamber, their energies automatically reaching for each other. The first fusion was instinctive, driven by survival. This time, we do it with purpose. A true reproduction, Nixus agreed, understanding her plan. Not just mixing our forms, but creating a stable new pattern that can sustain itself. As their consciousness began to merge again, Raven felt a moment of perfect clarity. This was what both their species had been seeking, not just physical union or energy transfer, but the courage to become something greater than the sum of their parts. The chamber began to glow as they initiated the final phase of their transformation. The transformation was unlike anything either of them had experienced before. In the depths of their merged consciousness, Raven and Nixus wove their essences together with deliberate precision, guided by both scientific understanding and intuitive connection. There, Raven's thoughts resonated through their shared awareness. Do you feel it? The pattern is stabilizing. Their combined form pulsed with new strength as the quantum fluctuations finally settled into harmony. Human DNA and Etherean energy matrices found a perfect balance, creating a stable framework that could sustain their unique fusion. When they emerged from the chamber, they were truly one being in two forms, their separate bodies maintained but linked by an unbreakable quantum bond. Their skin shimmered with an otherworldly iridescence, and their eyes held galaxies. We've done more than survive, Nixus observed, examining their new form with wonder. We've evolved. Raven nodded, feeling the deep rightness of their connection. And we're still changing. Look. She held up her hand, where tiny points of light danced between her fingers, a perfect blend of human cellular structure and Etherean energy patterns. We're not just sustaining the fusion. We're generating new forms of energy. Energy that could power new transformations, Nixus realized. Help others achieve what we have. Their celebration was interrupted by a familiar sensation, multiple quantum signatures entering Earth's atmosphere. But this time, something was different. Those aren't Inquisitor ships, Nixus said, their enhanced senses picking up the subtle variations. They're refugees. Through their shared consciousness, they felt the approaching vessel's energy patterns, dozens of other beings, both human and Etherian, all carrying the seeds of transformation within them. They felt our fusion, Raven understood with sudden clarity. Like calling to like. We're not the only ones who dreamed of unity. The first ship landed outside the ruined facility. Its door opened to reveal a human scientist hand in hand with an Etherian researcher, their forms already showing signs of preliminary fusion. We felt the change, the human said, hope shining in her eyes. We felt what you achieved. Can you help us? More ships landed, carrying more couples, humans and Etherians who had found love across the species barrier, who had been hiding their relationships from both governments. Each pair resonated with potential, ready to transcend their original forms. Well, Raven turned to Nixis, a smile playing on her transformed features. Looks like we won't have to search for our first research subjects. Indeed, Nixis's scales rippled with joy that Raven felt echo through their bond. Though perhaps research is the wrong word now. This is more like evolution, they said together, their synchronized voices creating harmonics that made the air shimmer. Over the following months, their ruined lab became a sanctuary. Under Raven and Nixis's guidance, more couples achieved stable fusion, each transformation slightly different but all part of the same revolution. They documented every success, every variation, building a new science of unified consciousness. The Inquisitors came, of course. But they found not two fugitives, but a community of transformed beings whose combined power could not be overcome. In the end, even some of the Inquisitors themselves chose transformation over conflict, their rigid beliefs crumbling in the face of undeniable evolution. 1 year after their first meeting, Raven and Nixis stood on the roof of their expanded facility, watching the sun set in spectrums only their enhanced eyes could see. Below them, more ships arrived daily, carrying more seekers of transformation. Do you remember why you first came here? Raven asked, leaning into their shared energy field. To study human reproduction. Nixis laughed, the sound creating beautiful patterns in the quantum field around them. I'd say we've learned a bit more than that. We learned that true reproduction, true evolution, isn't about maintaining pure bloodlines or species boundaries, Raven mused. It's about having the courage to create something new. Something wonderful. Speaking of creation, Nixis's scales shifted to a warm, excited pattern. Have you felt it? The new energy pattern growing between us? Raven placed a hand over her transformed body, feeling the distinct quantum signature developing within. Our child, she whispered in awe. The first of a new species, born of both human and Etherian essence. A living symbol of unity, Nixis wrapped their energy field protectively around her. Proof that love truly can create miracles. As the stars emerged above them, Raven reflected on how far they'd come from that first meeting in the lab. What had started as a simple study of reproduction had evolved into something far greater, a revolution of love that would forever change both their species. So, she smiled, feeling their child's energy pulse in harmony with their own, ready for our next experiment in reproduction. Nixis's answering kiss sent ripples through multiple dimensions, a testament to the power of love to transform, unite, and create wonders beyond imagination. In the end, they had learned the greatest truth of all, that reproduction, at its heart, was not just about creating new life, but about daring to become something more than you ever thought possible.